Hello and welcome to the football show. Myself, Shane Stapleton, joined as ever by Declan Bogue, and Brendan Devenney, former Donegal footballer, joins us as well. How are you doing, men?
Very best.
Good.
All right, Brendan.
I want to jump straight into it. I mean, we know what the semi-final situations and the relegation semi-finals are at the moment, but just Dublin beat Galway over the weekend, 216 to 115. Kerry saw off Roscommon 215 to 112. And it just occurs to me that every single week, Brendan, we're talking about how brilliant Conor Callahan is and how brilliant David Clifford are. I mean, as an inside forward yourself, a joy to watch.
Yeah, certainly. And I think in the arms race, Shane, the forward play has gone through the roof compared to defenders. I think the blanket defence has stopped man-to-man markers. And now as the forwards have got better and better, once the game has started to open up as it has now, it's phenomenal stuff. And you said the two boys, anything seems possible. I remember just thinking about myself and looking at them. If either of those players had a wide early on or have a bad miss, you can just tell it's water off a duck's back. Whereas you see before we forwards, if went down there, you can see pressure building in people and that. The modern forwards now, just everything's at their mercy in terms of, those players. There just doesn't seem a possibility they'll have a bad game. If anything, they'll just play okay or they play brilliant. But I thought the goal from Clifford there was so like a slam dunk from one bro to the next day. The setup play, it was, you would see in the NBA week in, week out. And I suppose that was what propelled Kerry on to victory in that match too. Very plucky performance from Roscommon, you'd have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Declan, like when you see these two lads, the fact they never panic during the game. Last week, Clifford had a quiet spell for maybe 25 minutes against Dublin. Then he takes over. Con, for example, against Galway, I thought he had a quiet first half, then takes over the game. Like these guys at such a young age, they're so patient and then so devastating.
Yeah, mentally they've got it. Mentally, there's so much that goes more into it than anything else. I mean, you even going back to all these young players now have had exposure to performance coaches and sports analysis and all the rest, that they come almost like by the time they're 21. Like, I mean, what age even is David Clifford? Like 21. I mean, they're all already the full package at that point. It's an astonishing thing. It is also a feature really of modern day coverage that we're able to talk about Con and David Clifford in a rivalry sense, because there's been other sort of the best forwards of their era, say like for example a Mickey Linden and a Peter Callahan. But the way games are covered now, if you just simply can't miss it. Like before there was no League Sunday, say in that era in the 90s. If you didn't see that game or if you didn't go to it, then you wouldn't have seen it. Now everybody's seeing these things instantly. So if David Clifford scores, it's on Twitter within minutes. Same with Conor Callahan then. So you get to see, we are spoiled in this era, whatever about modern technology and whatever else it has. It has given us such a greater scope to watch and consume Gaelic football.
Do you think, Declan, that I know from Conor Callahan from club training, his physical power is unbelievable, as is his decision making. What is it about Clifford that makes him so good? Is it what's up there, or innate skills, or what is it?
Everything has awareness. Like, I mean, I remember watching him play in the Hogan Cup final against St. Pat's Mahara, and I remember his coach, whose name escapes me now, saying after that game that the question was asked, like, is this guy, could he be as good as Maurice Fitzgerald? And he said about a 17-year-old, I think he's better. I honestly think he's better than Maurice Fitzgerald. It's the sort of thing that makes you kind of cringe a wee bit for the manager, saying, like, how can you say such a thing? And how could you argue against it now? I think that it's just his balance is just insane. His ability he's tall, he's got all that. Like, I mean, he's not quite as powerful as Conor Callahan, and it may be a mistake if he developed that kind of barrel-chestedness of Conor Callahan. They're two very different physiques, so you have to kind of go with what you have. He's rangy, tall, he incredibly strong, long-limbed. But I think it was Val Andrews that was pointing out different things about the way Val drills down on his scores, and he was pointing out how if David Clifford wanted to shoot off his left, he'll bounce the ball with his right hand, so he'll bounce it across his body So he'll lean then into the shot then if it's coming in from the left, and if he's coming shooting from the right, he'll bounce with his left hand. So the transfer of the ball almost transfers the power of where he's standing with his body. And I mean, it is, I tell you what, fair play to Val for picking it out, but it is one of those things that if you tried to coach, it would be very hard. I think it's just instinct with him. I think, honestly, when he's playing, he is just playing on pure instinct.
Do you think that, Brendan, like, do you think these guys think about their game and visualize? You know, you often hear this about players, or is it just instinct?
Well, you didn't worry about what hand I was going to bounce the ball with. I had only 1 foot to kick with, and even that mightn't work half the time. So I don't think anybody was analysing me the way Decky was talking about there. But yeah, I just when it comes to Clifford in particular, honestly, you talk about once-in-a-lifetime players. I mean, that quote from Marshall Gerald, I actually had no doubt from the first few times I've seen him, just everything about him. And as Decky says there, sometimes players can get bottled up if they're impactful or they need a certain type of play, if they're aerially strong, or if they need to run at people in terms of getting shut down. But he has a bit of everything. But his composure and his ability to kick off 2 feet, it is phenomenal. And I just think for someone like him, just let him go out and play. I mean, I talked to Kieran McGinney on Saturday about Armagh maybe not having more ambition in the game. And he was like, well, it's up to the players at times, you know, in terms of, you know, they have to go and play. And for a player like Clifford, I mean, I can't imagine Peter Keane giving him a lot of advice. I mean, let's be honest. I would just be saying here, if you're in the round of 40, give the ball to that man, hey, if you want to win the match. That's the long and short of it.
Yeah, and what is it about them that pressure doesn't seem to bother them at all?
I think the modern player now, as I say, looking at them and looking at forwards, Shane, it's the way things is coached now. There doesn't seem to be, and going back to that man-to-man thing where it was real, somebody's on your face up pulling and dragging. You can see players spin off now and they're let go. Now, in fairness to Clifford, I don't think anybody wants to let him go, but you see players move out the pitch, get in the areas in where they're coming in the back and moves, which means that you're always kind of in the game. And the pressure of one man to often be the chief scorer isn't really what it is now. You're often a massive spread of scores right across the pitch. Now, in saying that, Clifford, obviously, there is an onus on a player like him to get a lot of scores, but that doesn't bother him because the game now, I think, is opening up to suit them. And as I say, if you look at Clifford years ago, let's go back into my time, the defenders like some Sean Marty Locker, Darren Fraser, Conor Gormley, like they would have a cut at Clifford, I think, in terms of really man marking and players like that. And there seemed to be every team maybe had at least one, which would be good. And I just don't think those players are available now. And if you try and double team them, particularly with a team like Kerry, you know, there's plenty of other lads, as I say, half-backs and everybody in the pitch now can chip in me scores. So you can never detail too many players towards them. But I think the mentality of guys now, and I see it be free takers a lot. And you can remember back to old All-Ireland days, you know, All-Ireland semi-final or final, particularly if somebody was new and the heat that was on the free taker. I always remember the pressure was on the free taker. You know, kicking from the ground was building. You look at lads now, it doesn't matter. They miss one, they score one. It's straight on, let's go. So I think, yeah, you're right. The mentality has completely changed. And I think the Dubs are at the forefront of that. You know, I look at their players, you know, over this brilliant team. Everyone comes in and out. They all play at a level that doesn't seem to be influenced by what's happening around them. And that's why in crunch games, when it comes down to those final minutes, often against poor Mayo, they are in complete control of that situation because their mentality has led them to that. And of course, success does build that. But every player comes in, fits the mold. And I suppose going back to the once in a generation thing, I mean, Bernard Brogan's tweet about that isn't true because this Dublin team has kept on turning over players, but those players come in with the exact same personality and continuity, which means Dublin have this. They're so difficult to beat them. We're trying to read them now in league games. It doesn't seem to matter to them. Every time I see them, Galway had a cut at them at the weekend. They eventually won the match. But you're thinking, what Dublin team is that? What level are they playing at? And it's scary for everybody else that they have that mentality. And listen, I'm not knocking them for that, but to me, they're so far ahead of everybody else in that. So, well, it used to be years ago in terms of championship, on the day, a team might drop its performance for a smaller side to come in and take them out. And that's rarely happening now. I know we've seen it last year a couple of times, which was brilliant to see around Cork beating Kerry, then Tip beating Cork, and of course Donegal losing to Cavan. But with the Dubs, that just doesn't seem to happen. That on-the-day thing is gone. There's a certain level of talent, a certain level of performance. It's constant with them, which is why they are the team they are.
I'm going to ask you a slightly unfair question then. If you had to pick between one of the two, Con or Clifford, to be the difference maker for Donegal, and I'll ask you the same for Fermanagh, Declan, who would you take, Con or Clifford, Brendan?
Listen, as much as Con is unbelievable, I mean, at this point, listen, Clifford's the best player. Clifford has the potential to be the best player ever played. GA, that's how good that fella is. At this age, for him to be doing what he's doing, I'm just nothing surprises with me. I mean, opening day, the 2-6, the goals that he scored, it's as if he's living some kind of GA dream for all us forwards, how we would have dreamed. So I certainly think, they put everybody against Clifford at this point. It's kind of like Michael Murphy up here, who's the best player ever played for Donegal. He's so far ahead, and I think Clifford is moving into a zone where you'd already think if he keeps improving, which seems crazy, I think he could be ranked as the best ever.
Declan?
No, there's Brendan has it all squared off there, but we have
Seamus quickly. Becky's going to give away.
Yeah, we get Seamus back in and get rid of Sean, but no.
Sean, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's hard to add anything more than what Brendan's after saying, because when he says that he's reimagined it, he's made young lads dream of what could happen. Like, it's a bit like a few years ago when Eamon Fitzmaurice kept it under wraps about when they went away to Portugal for a warm weather training camp. They put the Gooch at centre half forward for all that training camp, and Kieran Donaghy said in his book that he could have imagined someone like the Gooch playing in the hole for Liverpool, because of his balance and his ability to pick a pass. And then, like, at that point, especially in that semi-final against Dublin, it was almost like, Colm Cooper with the step back and the through ball. I think it was Donica Walsh's goal. He was reimagining even what a centre half forward, almost like an upgrade on Kieran McDonald type centre half forward player. But, like, we've seen so many different types of full forward. Like, there's been the battering rams and the heavy scorers, and the lads are completely, like, the fellas that were able to do pretty much everything, like a Bernard Brogan. But then someone like a David Clifford comes along, and he's routinely making people, and this is not to sound cruel, but he makes people look really stupid. He makes people look as if they're playing an underage game against him. Like, with even the way he bounces the ball, if you look at it, he's just so graceful. I think maybe it's the grace that sets him apart, and people just love watching it. Like, it's just his ability to actually move. Like, it's enchanting. It's spellbound. When you actually look at it, you cannot take. When you're watching the TV and he's up there in the corner of the screen, you're saying, "Where's Clifford? Where's Clifford?" I don't care where the ball is. Like,
I'm going to give a vote to Condo, which you'll understand as a clubmate, and I'll point out that he's the one collected All Ireland after All Ireland. He's not necessarily going for that top corner goal unless he absolutely has to. Maybe Tyrone 2018, I think it was, when he buried one in from probably the edge of the area. But other than that, he's the sort of player who just goes head down, straight for goal. And you pretty much know danger here every time he gets the ball. So I think you'll understand that I go for Con.
That's fine with me.
Homer.
Just a quick point, actually. Pat Ranahan, the former Limerick player, said over the weekend, brilliant games over the last 3 weeks in the league, standard and competitiveness, top drawer, big scores, league format being played during summer months, the way to go. Who would have thought it? Brendan, would you like maybe just on a broader scale, would you like to see this as the championship, just a bit more of a league sort of structure where you've got teams of equal levels against each other in good weather? Yeah,
I think it's pointing that way. Seeing around, obviously scrapping the pre-game, the likes of McKenna Cup we have up here. There's no room for it, as we give the respect to the club championship, and let that be played in the summer, and give respect to our members in terms of particularly the volume of members that were pushed further and further down. But they get, as you said, fascinating games in the league, and I think probably looking at it, it's maybe been a bit unfair on a few sides. I mean, if you look at Roscommon, for example, being thrown in with, they'll always give Galway a game. You never know who would exactly come out on top of that, but certainly having to play Kerry and Dublin. surely they might have looked at the likes of Armagh, or they've beaten Donegal in a few league performances recently, and so it was tough on them to be thrown in with that. And I think Longford in a similar way, if you look at them, lumped them with Cavan and Fermanagh and Derry, a rejuvenated Derry, and the two teams were relegated. So there's probably a few teams in there that maybe got it a bit tough the way it was divided up, but certainly it's even though you think the Ulster teams might be sick of playing each other, there's such intrigue in all those ties and warm-ups for the championship is coming ahead. But yeah, to incorporate the league into the championship is something we could look at, because it is that level below it. No one, as we see, particularly cares about winning the league anymore. Even Donegal, it'll be like a pre-warm-up game against Dubs whenever that in 2 weeks' time. So I think the league, as you say, is just what it is. It is a pre-championship competition that can be incorporated into it, because there's so many fascinating games in it. And then what that would do is take out the need for the likes of your Super 8s, because you would have your tasters, you would have your good games, and then you're into the cut of championship. And I think that would be a good way forward.
Declan, do you want to jump in on that point?
And in what sense, though? How do you want me to develop that?
Well, just would you be happier to see that league format happen earlier in the championship, and then it's all knockout from then on? So like teams would then get their 3 or 4 games, and they'd really get to test themselves, maybe even develop after a couple of games.
Are we talking about keeping the split in the leagues permanent, and leaving it as the north-south? Because I'm not so sure about that. I think in normal times, say for example, Tyrone goes to Kerry come to Tyrone. Like, there are still a number of people that love to build mini holidays around that kind of thing. You can't deny people a chance to see. And I know that there is an intrigue around Ulster to see, especially this year. Look, this year was just a one-off. Like, we had Armagh, Monaghan, Tyrone, and Donegal all in one division, and that's fine. But people would really get sick of it if that was all that they had. Like, people want to see every year Tyrone playing Kerry. They want to see a Donegal playing Dublin, because just the animosity is kind of crept in between those two squads, or even just in general with the two counties. So I wouldn't like to deny that opportunity for that to take place. But scheduling, if we can get the games on week over the summer and get everything played off. Look, I mean, I have no appetite for another debate about how we fix the fixtures. Like, let's just move it on a bit. Like.
Okay, let's move on.
Definitely, Shane. No, listen, the league, I wouldn't want to keep the northern sections. Definitely open it up. I think what we need to get rid of is the semi-finals and the league final. Whoever finishes top of the league, they won the league. That's how the league should be.
Yeah.
Let that be sorted. Now, relegation and promotion, I'd still do two up, 2 down if it was against either one last game and then they play the winners, so 1 up or 2 down, whatever it is. But I would certainly just leave the league as in whoever's top wins it, and leave it at that.
Okay, well, moving on then to Division 1 North. Armagh drew with Donegal 116 apiece. Tyrone drew with Monaghan 14 points apiece. So that's been a very tight league there. Donegal top on 4, Tyrone and Armagh on 3 points each, and Monaghan then in second. And that means Dublin will play Donegal in the league semi-final. That'll be at a neutral venue. Tyrone will play Kerry. Relegation, Armagh, Roscommon, Monaghan, Galway. We'll touch on Monaghan having home advantage against Galway, despite the fact that they had that COVID ban and they had that home fixture taken away. Padraic Joyce isn't happy. But first off, you were at the Armagh-Donegal game, 116 apiece. Very good stuff again. And crucially, Declan, in front of a crowd.
That was the nicest part of it. And Brendan was there too, working, but it was strange because they have the press in the stand still, which is grand. And a few weeks ago, actually, in Omagh, it was absolutely Baltic. And then on Saturday, the sweat was lashing off us all. And that is a lovely, that is a really interesting thing. Wouldn't like it all year. I wouldn't like it in the depths of maybe an Ulster club campaign or anything like that, sitting out in the stand. But it will all be different. It's just a lovely novelty for now. But when the Armagh team came out in the next month, then there was a big yo-ho. It was really like you're looking around yourself, who's doing that? What stewards are doing that? But even though there's 500 people in there, at times it felt there was an awful lot more. Like, I mean, it just added so much to it, and it makes you feel just how much you'd lost. And a couple of times now, Donegal might have felt that they were hard done by in a decision. I remember Paddy McBurdy has been double teamed, Bren, sort of about 10 minutes from the end, and he was looking to the referee to blow a whistle, and Marsh Deegan blew a whistle for steps instead on Paddy McBurdy, and the roar that got up, like, you know, would have deafened you off the roof. So look, it was in fact, it was a little bit of a privilege to have been there, to see that, to see everyone back in, and just the smiles on people's faces, and just how much they were ringing out of the day. Like, what a big day out for everybody.
What was it like for you, Brendan? I suppose even bumping into people outside the ground, that must have been nice.
It was great. I think there's a great camaraderie with people at the games. Again, with us being, you know, hermiting in our houses, to get out and seeing everybody at matches, and the more and more people's coming. I actually was I was still in the commentary area. See, I was more VIP than Declan. He was sitting out in his fake designer shades, lapping up the sun, you know. But the influence of the crowd actually was pretty large, because when you think about it too, with us not having crowds, it was something new in it. And of course, even a small crowd can make a lot of noise. I mean, you remember the Ulster final last year, Dick, and Cavan officials were in there. There must have been 25 or 30 around, and they were going absolutely nuts. I mean, even there, the buzz off them was unreal. I know they hadn't won it since '97 or whatever, but that added so much to it. So the Armagh fans, particularly in turnover tackles, as you were saying, and good scores, you know, listen, we all work off the vibe. So that was a high point for Armagh. I thought Armagh were very well set up on the night, and Donegal fought back. But as you say, I mean, people are saying about Donegal fans and all getting into it. I mean, listen, it was home venues for northern teams. It had to be the majority of their fans. So I couldn't understand people having a bit of a gripe about that. Until the South catches up in vaccinations and people are allowed in, then we can start to say, here, let's even it up.
And what were your thoughts on the game? Actually, sorry, you can jump in there, Declan.
It's a funny thing, Bren, because we're talking about Con and David Clifford, right? And I'm just wondering, like, if they arrived on the scene 6 years ago, would they have had the effect that they had? I know Con Callaghan's been around for a few years now, but if they had arrived as seniors in 2012, say, for example, would they have had the same years, their opening years of their career, as they have had now? Because I think that the puzzle that Jim McGuinness set and so many other kind of managers took and adapted, or just, you know, in the most part, especially in the lower leagues, an awful lot of managers just ripped it off and took it like an off the peg defensive system, like everybody back behind the ball, and that's it. But back then, you'll remember, like, how did Donegal beat teams? They beat teams because they're trying to thread that ball into a full forward in a central position, and all of a sudden then the full forward was double teamed them with a sweeper back, and they would get another body in there, and all of a sudden the turnover and they'd break at speed. And that was by and large how an awful lot of forward play was being frustrated. Obviously then that worked all the way up to the big Dublin in 2014. Kerry had no other choice but to mirror the exact same system to beat them in an All-Ireland final, and that's exactly how it was. After that, Jim Gavin went away and reimagined it, brought in Jason Sherlock, and they started using the whole width of the pitch and the sidelines and the end line. So we talked about this to John Evans last week. But if you look at Armagh, right, so every time they were looking to get the ball in, they had nobody. I think they kept maybe Oisin O'Neill, but Oisin O'Neill was nearly standing on Sean Patton's toes or on the end line. They had nobody in the central channel. They kept everybody out wide, and they worked the ball then up, and they either stopped and turned around and waited for a man coming off the shoulder, or else they worked the ball out wide and then put the ball into the space where there are no Armagh players to run into the space. I mean, how much of that is down to Kieran Donaghy's coaching ability? And I say that in there's two things about that, right? People might say about Armagh that it was a distraction technique, or that it was a gimmick in some way, bringing in Kieran Donaghy. But I look at not so much what coaching he's done, but the way that even basketball is played on the court, because there's so much on-court coaching, players talking to each other through each play, players communicating with each other, that, you know, Kieran Donaghy had a world of that experience. Even in his book, you picked up that he was challenging Jack O'Connor over different scenarios where they could work out. So he's always been really a deep thinker about the game. And I'm just wondering, is that's the influence we're seeing right now with Armagh, the way that they're shaped, their attacking shape and all that. It just seems to be miles ahead of where it was in previous years.
I think first and foremost, they have an unbelievable amount of talent. They've serious forwards. You know, the guys you mentioned there, Campbell, Grugan, O'Neill's. I mean, I know Jamie Clark stepped away. And funny, just going back to what you were saying earlier, Nat, certain forwards, I think, just got sick of blanket defence. And would those top forwards have got a bit more sickened if they played previously? I think they did. And I think that's maybe led to the likes of Jamie Clark coming in and coming out. Some people are just like fed up with it all. Now, the game's opened up now substantially. What I was most impressed with Armagh and on Saturday evening was more so their defensive shape and their physicality. I mean, they were so superior to Donegal in that. And what I couldn't understand was, we've seen it so many times in football matches, why don't you enforce what you're good at and keep driving it back? See this thing of sitting. Now, at the water break, it was 5-1 at the Armagh, and it was like Armagh were just brushing Donegal aside. Defensively, they were solid. They had two banks of maybe 6 or 7 players across protecting their defence. And when they broke down, it was kick passes inside. They were trying to isolate the O'Neills inside against Donegal, because even in the forward line, they were much more superiorly physically, Donegal. And really, they're running Donegal ragged. The water break, as we've seen, and the water break has been massive in so many games now. You think of the many times it's broke a team's fluidity in the game, has allowed the Donegal management to come and say, right, hold on a second here, we're being exposed, we're getting sucked into a blanket defence. So from that 5-1, Armagh were full value for it. And then after that, Donegal stopped bringing so many players forward. They sat under their shape a little. But even after that, for a lot of the first half, I was so impressed with Armagh. Now, that's defensively. Now, they seem to have players all over the pitch that can influence it. And at half-time then, there was a big job to do for Declan Bonner's team. And I think it was 65 minutes that Kelly got the goal. Donegal kept coming back. And then, but that put them 4 up. And at that point, like, everybody in the ground would have said, Armagh, this game won. Now, again, that's when the worst effects of sitting on a lead started to come into Armagh. Now, I know they were down as low as Division 3. They were 9 years out of Division 1. But it's there that you think, right, we have control of this game. What do? We put everybody right inside our 50 to 45 and invite Donegal on, because if they get 2 points, we'll get a point. The clock will run down. We'll win the match. But as we know, if anything, at the end, it was Donegal who actually could have won the game. But how much of that was Donegal? How much was it Armagh inviting on? You'd feel disappointed very much from Armagh if they left. They definitely were the better side over the course of the game. But as yet, they were clinging on. And a lot of that goes back to mentality. But listen, I think Armagh are certainly on the way up. And again, a bit like you mentioned, a couple of Ulster teams, what I've seen from Monaghan as well, I think anything could happen for Armagh this summer. There's no one I think they'll fear. And in a similar way, Monaghan look rejuvenated. And like Armagh, I think going into the championship, it's a shot for them. They both consider they can win Ulster, and I think they both can.
Declan, going all the way back to maybe 2014 when Paul Grimley was in his final year as manager of Armagh, Stefan Campbell looked like he could become one of the best players in the game, and maybe his form was up and down in the meantime, but he gave another powerful display here, scored 4 points, some of them just like his pace and power going through, and he's a very good kicker of the ball as well. Like, he's really kicking on to a serious level. He
played a fair bit of soccer for Lurgan Celtic, I believe, and Clonagale would have been one of the powerhouses, but they're sort of been an intermediate. He's won intermediate player of the year and all that in Armagh. They wouldn't be challenging for senior honours. He also has admitted in public that, you know, I don't know to what extent, but he said that, you know, he struggled before with gambling issues and that, you know. So God knows, like, you know, what's behind the athlete and what kind of issues are there. But he certainly is. I hate to say streaky player, but he has turned it on and turned it off in the past. Now he has put together a few really highly impressive performances, and there's no doubt about it. Like, I've been watching for years where He has unbelievable speed. He created that goal. He got his 4 points from play. He just kind of frightens teams too, because he is very fast. And when he does go, he's direct. I don't think they're missing Jamie. I'm just looking at that team, and there's Rory Grugan will play a bit deeper and thread ball into Oisín O'Neill. And then you've got Ross McQuillan, who's unbelievably fast. Just, I suppose, he's been away at Aussie rules and stuff like that, so he's going to take a wee while, maybe, just coming into it. But Rian O'Neill, Oisín O'Neill speak for themselves. Jamar Hall's fairly busy, get up and down the pitch and all. Still wouldn't have been that impressed with him fisting the ball over the bar. It came in for a right bit of discussion last night. Kieran O'Hanlon, Conor Mack, the pace is all over the park here with these guys. Jarlath Oak, Burns and Neil Grimley is as good a midfield as you're going to find around the place right now, because they're two very evenly. Grimley's played for Ireland. Jarlath Oak can be whatever he wants to become. He's got so much potential in him. He was possibly a bit quieter on Saturday than I've seen him of late, but he can be a serious player. But getting back to your point, Campbell, absolutely. But there's so many lads like that too that, if they just had that, another 20% of consistency, they would be world beaters. Like Michael Langan, for example, he's kicking around there in that panel for the last number of years. Ciaran McGonigal is good enough foil for Hugh McFadden. Kind of think they're a wee bit too similar though, Brendan. And why is Michael Langan now just not saying, I am the dynamic Brian Fenton of this team here. Look at what I've been able to do 2 weeks in a row. Take the ball and just whiz it down the field, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to score points like this, 2 or 3 every week, and I'm going to be the man. I mean, a lot of these players, we look at them and we admire them and what they can do, but what is the missing ingredient for them to say, rather than just be talked about as a good player, I want to be the absolute, the guy who sets everything in motion here, the standard bearer for the team.
Yeah, well, if he was a Fenton, I would be happy enough now. That's high praise for him if he's getting that. I suppose he's new enough. Last year was the first year he probably nailed down a starting berth, so I think he's still evolving as a man. I think with Donegal, those other players that you mentioned, because listen, our weakness is obviously in our defence. We've brought through maybe 5 or 6 top quality forwards this last 3 or 4 years, and we really haven't been bringing through any defenders. Now there's been a few lads, Morrison and Gillespie there, which both have had terrible times with injuries. Outside of that there, even Owen Ban really is an attacking type player. So, this year we could win the championship with Neil McGee and Paddy McGrath in our full back line. 2 of the lads that were playing in 2012, of course, and they played a few years before that, obviously. So such is the low turnover or low productivity of defenders that's coming through for us. But certainly those players you mentioned, I mean, the one game Donegal were really in control of, I thought, for most of the game was Tyrone. And there's no coincidence Michael Murphy played that full match, and then he didn't play against Monaghan and he didn't play against Armagh. And we've seen Donegal be up and down, and his influence over Donegal, sometimes it's not about being on the ball, it's the subtle things, it's his leadership, what he's talking to in the pitch. And then at times they just go to Michael and either kick a 45 or kick an outrageous point, or he'll just take the ball and slow it down. He just seems to have this thing where he's in charge. He directs the whole of it. So while Donegal's missing him, it's important for players. It's notable you mentioned Langan there. I mean, unbelievable. If he keeps going like this, of his own goal of the season competition, 2 phenomenal goals. Yeah. It's something there, Dick. Funny, just goal chances. The amount of goal chances we're seeing missed now. I know it's a hard thing to practice at training, but point scoring, we're on about forwards getting better and better. Not necessarily in front of goals. Now, I know it's not always forwards that are in, but if you look at Conor McCarthy, you can say bad defender from Donegal, but when he had those 3 strikes, his composure to just plant the ball where he wanted it, that's a top forward. And if you look at it, the amount of goal chances, I know in the down game there yesterday with Westmeath, the amount of chances that were missed, goal chances, players snatching at him, taking the wrong option. I think that's a composure. If you're looking at what forwards want to work on going forward, going in this championship, it's definitely putting the ball in the back of the net, and not always. I've seen people giving off about the handy fist. The fist over the bar for me, more often than not, is the right option. It's usually a tight angle. But certainly when players are going for goal, how many times have we seen either under hitting the ball or blazing it over? And if you want to watch the perfect finish, just put that Conor McCarthy hat-trick on. I don't really want to watch it anymore myself. It was hard watching it at the time.
Yeah, it was glorious. But wouldn't you have to say, like, from a Donegal point of view, they've come back in both games, so they're not panicking. There have been questions about the biggest games in the last couple of years, just Super 8 games, different kind of games at the kind of sharp end of the championship. Can they get it done in those situations? Because it never seems to be a question of the talent. So you score 5 of the last 6 points to secure a draw here. And also then another big bonus is to get a half an hour into Oran McNeilish, because he's such a key player as well. But it is interesting, like Jamie Brennan wasn't there either, that Brennan, just so much quality in attack there. But like, do you take a lot of positives out of this, being able to come from behind and stay calm when you're under fire?
Yeah, if the boys were staying calm, we weren't on the line or anybody watching on. That's the second week saying I'm almost I can feel my voice going, because the Monaghan game there was just goal chance after goal chance. Normally a goal chance is the deciding point of the game, or a missed goal chance. That's what Declan, these guys would write about after the game, turning point. You were like, this doesn't seem right. And then in the last night, as I say, with Donegal looked down and out a couple of times. I mean, they had 110 in the second half, which is very encouraging. But again, Armagh did drop into their shell. But you're right. I mean, young Oisín Gallen is another guy. I think he's capable of anything out there. I mean, the strange thing that happened in the game, Conor O'Donnell comes on sub. I'm not expecting him to score. He hits 2 points. And had a go at another one. He had a drop shot that should have ended up in the goal. You remember, it was cleared out. Thompson blazed at it. That would have been the one in the game for Donegal. But also, there was a point from play. Keelan Ward come up the pitch just after the Armagh goal, 4 up. And you're thinking at that stage, if Armagh's sitting this for a while, this game's over. Donegal have to respond. Where was it going to come from? We weren't sure. I decided probably McBurdy. Keelan Ward comes starting in from the side, fists the ball over the bar, and that put it back to 3 and gave Donegal hope again. But you're right, Shane, the forward talent all over the pitch for Donegal is not in question. But unless it's a shootout game, if we come up against a very regimented side now that's going to try and physically get at us, it is a bit of a worry. That said, we've loads of injuries, and we're seeing soft tissue injuries because of the late comeback. I think at the minute Donegal have 7, maybe 8 players that have all got just minor injuries, minor niggles. That's a bit of it's a bit of a disaster in terms of the GA was elite. Now, if it was taken off elite, that's fair enough. But without games being back, allow them to come back and train early. We're seeing now the repercussions of that. And if it takes out a top player, you're talking about Con there and Clifford and the likes of Murphy. These can be the winning and losing of it. And if they're out of the game because of injury, because we're back too late, that's such a shame. And already you have a few Donegal players that there's question marks over whether they're going to make the championship.
Yeah, like back in the day, you used to see players mid-sprint pull up and hold their hamstring. You remember even Michael Owen in professional soccer, you'd see it. That had more or less disappeared out of the game, but it's come back. We've seen lots of examples of it over the last few weekends. Even David Dunn came on for Wexford against Kilkenny down at Nolan Park at the weekend. 3 or 4 minutes later, pulls up and he's gone. So definitely a fair point there. A final question for you, Declan, on the Donegal situation at the moment. Brendan has referenced if they come up against a team with a good structure, how they will perform. They have Dublin next in the semi-final. It's going to be at a neutral venue. So it's actually probably a great chance to test the team.
No, I'll tell you, there's a couple of things about that. And number one is I am kind of glad that Donegal held the line here. I was led to believe that Dublin wanted it in their own venue. The J were happy to put it in a Croke Park or Parnell Park or whoever. Maybe they might have said that Croke Park was a neutral venue. Either way, Donegal were told they were going to have to travel, and they stuck to their guns and they said no. And you know what? Like other counties they've really let themselves down over Donegal and their opposition to Dublin getting too many home games. The idea, the situation in the Super 8s, when you actually look at it now in this remove, and there has been no Super 8s this year and last year, and to think that Dublin were getting 2 games in Croke Park when every other team had to travel to one and play another one in a neutral venue, it's obscene, and it's ridiculous then that there were Dublin officials, highly remunerated officials, were lining up to tell people that it was a divisive thing to have any opposition against this. Like, I mean, in anyone's, it just, sometimes Ireland just baffles me, the people's opposition and just accepting a situation that is so blatantly wrong. And Dublin's additional game in the Super 8s was always ridiculous, and it's indefensible. And Donegal were the one county that said, you know what, this is wrong and this needs to be changed. And shamefully, other county boards they weren't up for that fight, and they let Dublin roll them over. That hasn't happened here, and it's going to be played in neutral venue. I expect it'll be Kingspan, Breffni Park. But I spoke to Declan Bonner after the game, and we talked a wee bit about the pointlessness of a league semi-final. And he just said, look here, we'll just be giving boys a run out and seeing what getting other boys who, like, I'm looking down at the list here, the like of Jason McGee, the like of Dara Boyle, and that haven't been starting and finishing games. This is not going to be, and there's going to be nothing good you can take out of this game. Dublin will do the same. Tyrone and Kerry will do the exact same. It'll be just 4 dud teams going out and playing league semi-finals, and makes a joke of the league. It's a pretty awful system to begin with, and it will be made a mockery of in a fortnight's time.
Do you feel the same way, Brendan? Or do you think that Donegal will get a good test here?
Yeah, I'm not as down on it as Dick. I just think it's the year that's in it. You see, he's coming out, the knives are flying there. I agree with him, it will be played at Breffni. I think that initially I didn't want Donegal to get into the semi-final because of what was happening, but now as I look at it with the week's break, as Dick would say, even though it's a dud game, there is some players that can get some time, and playing against Dublin is always a good barometer for you, not necessarily how the game goes in terms of the whole team, but if you can match up to a player and hold your own, that's going to give you a bit of confidence. And of course, anybody that has any kind of niggle or anybody needs a rest, Declan Bonner's not going to play them. But there is a load of players who could do with a workout, and Declan's mentioned a few of them there. And I think that's still important. So initially I thought, we could do without this. Now I'm thinking, it's like somewhat of a challenge game. And you're right, it's a shame on the league. It does definitely detract from what it is to maybe win the league or progress in the league. But I think most teams do just want to stay in the league, and that is the big thing. And I think because of the year that's in it, it's just turned out like this. Hopefully it'll be corrected next year. But I'm now not looking at it as a negative. I think Donegal can go out and just have a good workout, hopefully come through injury unscathed, and certain players can find out a bit about themselves. And so that's what any team wants.
And Tyrone drew with Monaghan over the weekend, and there was also a nice crowd there at Armagh. So it means that Tyrone will be through to a semi-final against Kerry, and we'll talk about that more when we get closer to the game. But from Monaghan's point of view, they get a draw here, but after breaking the COVID regulations and not getting their first home game where they had to play in Enniskillen, they now get a home advantage for a relegation semi-final against Galway. So Padraic Joyce, he said afterwards, I'm just after being told it is away because they had no home games. We had 2 home games, so they're being rewarded for breaking curfew, and I find that unbelievable, to be honest. It's a joke if you ask me, and I don't know how Croke Park came up with that solution to play in Monaghan. We'll play wherever it is, but I think it disrespects the whole system and the whole Alliance League if you're going to reward a county to get a home vital game when you broke the rules. What do you think of that, Brendan?
I think that this is a joke, what he's saying. I mean, it's nothing got to do with breaking rules or COVID. They had served their punishment, so that meant that they had an away game, or they had a home game and they didn't get it, and Galway had to. So the rules are what the rules are. I'm just, I don't know what the point of this is. I mean, I heard last night, I caught a bit of a Sunday game, and I heard Oisin McConville on saying about reward or this or that. It's got nothing to do with reward. These are just the rules in place. There's their punishment served. Then it goes back to normal rules of the league. So it is what it is. I don't understand why anyone's giving off about that. It's not what the point is. It's just going back to normal league rules.
What do you think, Declan? Managers being precious?
You see, but is Padraic Joyce just playing the game? Like, is he just playing the white man here? Like, saying, is there not a wee bit of stage mentality? It's like Newbridge or nowhere. It's like anything. Like, I mean, yeah, I often take anything managers say and just look at it and say, right, well, what's he really saying here? What's the real message behind this? Or does he actually totally believe all that? And I don't know, I'd have been coming down and side a wee bit of Oisin. But having said that, there should have been clearly laid out that, you know, these will be played at neutral venues the same way as any other All-Ireland semi-final for the league have been played at neutral venues down through the years. It's a nonsense like that. It isn't just all in Croke Park, maybe. But I can see why Donegal would object to that too.
Yeah, just jumping back to Tyrone there, Darren McCurry scored 5 points. 2 of them came from marks, but he has to be one of the standout players of the league so far. And beside him, I put Shane McGuigan, who has also been excellent for Derry. They had a 116-211 win over Cavan, and they were very impressive and looked like a team that can really kick on again this year, Brendan.
Yeah, definitely. You know, two top drawer players. You know, McCurry, like he stepped away a couple of times. You want him to come back to the Jamie Clark thing. It's funny that's come up and McCurry's come up because McCurry has stepped away a couple of times and a few Tyrone players had. And it always left us question marks about our Tyrone forwards happy. Are they playing enough attacking football? Which I don't think they definitely weren't, and they weren't. But also blanket defence was playing into that. And now I suppose McCurry's in there. There's a freshness in there. It was unusual he didn't see game time against Donegal. I don't know what that was about, but he has a wand of a left foot, and I think the lad's capable of anything, and he has this wee stand about him, this wee attitude on the pitch. You know, he's your typical wee corner forward. Like he can walk a walk and talk a talk. That said, it has never really happened for him in Championship. Now, again, he's been mixed up in the middle of blanket defence times, and Tyrone maybe not being the Tyrone of old. So I don't want to blame him for that. But I think this is a big year for him. You know, when you're thinking about McKenna and McShane coming back, you know, they're brute power type players. You need that wee bit of foil. And if they can get him again, you're on about players coming in the loop. He looks like when he gets that half a yard, he just has a real consistency popping the ball over the bar. I think he's potential to be an outstanding forward, but it hasn't happened for him yet in Championship. And that's Tyrone will certainly be looking at him with the likes of Devenney and that coming in as well, to think, you know, we have 4 or 5 forwards here that can do serious damage on a day. And as you're saying, Shane McGuigan, I mean, what a player he is. You know, he has serious ability, and you just want Derry. I want Derry to come back up to a team that can compete like the way Armagh have come back now, so the best players can actually shine. Otherwise, you're going to have situations where they can be shut down. A bigger team can afford to leave 2 or 3 players on them when they come on the Ulster, and you don't see the best of McGuigan. But for Derry, it's that core, I think, you know, the likes of McCaig and Rogers, you know, that get them up the middle, experienced players, you know, McFall, Glasses back. And then with McGuigan inside, I think he's got all the talents. And for Derry to bounce back, you know, Cavan, the great comeback kings, you know, Derry that game won. No one ever has a game won against Cavan. You know, I have to admire them. They're a serious outfit. And when they come back at that point, Derry were rocking, and it should have been Cavan won the game. So that shows a lot of maturity for this Derry team. You're looking for pointers to the Championship because Derry have been brittle, you know, going down to Division 4, a county with their resources and their abilities. And I think the big thing is the Glen Slough-Neil players, you know, getting club players in Derry to buy into the county thing is what Gallagher has demanded. And those 2 clubs are highly represented, and they're 2 of the best clubs in Ulster. And I think that is really pushing it. When we hear somebody like McGuigan then, his coolness to hit that winner, he's a player that you can really build it forward around. So great signs for Derry. And a lot of people thought when the Ulster Championship draw come up that Down last year, seeing as how far they were against Cavan in their semi-final, people are saying, you know, Down and Newry, they get rattled Donegal, you know, and I think they can. But what we've seen in this league hasn't been good enough from Down in terms of maybe putting it up to Donegal. And if anything, Derry's performances have started to say, you know, if Donegal were to get over Down, that they could be a side that could give it to Donegal. And that's what we want to see, competitive teams and Derry back to where they should be, at least up to that level of competing and back in the Division 2. That's at least where this Derry side wants to be aiming for now. Consolidate there, but be able to have a cut of teams in Ulster. And I think, should Donegal get over Down, that'll be a very interesting fixture.
I'll let you in there, Declan.
Here, Donegal Down, right? So I think Donegal get through that hand enough. Down's the mood there is just not great, like, and it's sort of permeating everything right now. But I'll tell you now, if you look at 2019 when Fermanagh were hosting Donegal in the Ulster Championship, Rory Gallagher had an ultra defensive game plan against Donegal, and I forget it now what was in the scoreline in the end, but Fermanagh ran Donegal far closer than most other teams until their journey was cut in the Super 8s that year. But they won the Ulster Championship at a canter. But that day in Enniskillen, I think they hadn't scored after about 13 minutes because of the game plan that Rory had set out. And while people are getting very excited about Derry, especially they scored 5 goals against Fermanagh, they kind of wait till all the players get up forward and then they make a break. So they'll toy about with the ball, wait for lads to get into position, and then they'll make a break. And it looks as if Derry are moving it on and kicking it. They're so offensive, but really, it's one thing to do it against a very raw Fermanagh or a Longford who are just not at the races there. And Derry have been working very, very hard during lockdown. In terms of when the first lockdown came, I've been told Rory Gallagher went around and visited all the panel at their homes to see what kind of setup they had for their home gyms. Peter Hughes, the former Tyrone player, has been their S&C guy there. They have been working very, very hard. They trained something like 27 out of 31 days in one of the first months that Gallagher landed in the county. So this has been building and building and building. The difference is that in Derry, you probably have a better quality of forward. And in Shane McGuigan, you've got an excellent, very mobile, very fit and strong corner, full forward there to lead the way. That's what probably attracted Rory Gallagher to this job in Derry. I could see Derry giving Donegal a lot of problems, but I don't buy it at all when it's said about this new Derry team and play a completely different style. You can play one style against Longford Fermanagh, but Rory Gallagher, whether people will say it's a weakness or whatever, but they will play a game designed to frustrate Donegal, and that would be worth seeing.
Conor Glass would give a decent enough performance. I can only imagine that his ceiling is very, very high, and he can go on to be brilliant. And similarly with Ross McQuillan as well, the more game time he gets, the better he'll get for Armagh. One thing for Derry is that Brendan Rodgers went off. He was another one of these players that pulled up with a hamstring out of nowhere as well. So if he's missing for the championship, he's a massive loss. Just a couple of more points to touch on before we finish up. Tadhg Morley's red card for Kerry. Did you think it was a red or not? I saw Darren O'Sullivan tweeting, what was Tadhg supposed to do? Unintentional collision, crazy decision to send him off. In real time, I thought, wow, that's a red. But with the slow-mo, I thought definitely not.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I know.
I'll let you in, Declan.
One of those ones you can't avoid it. It's coming straight for you. And it's almost instinct to hold up your hands to almost protect yourself. You see a man barreling towards you, especially you got a wee bit of a shove. There's not much that Tadhg Morley could have done there.
Yeah, okay. And then just one final point then. Cian Mackey said, is the long ball finally coming back into the game? So dangerous when it's used right. Great Galway goal. So that was obviously the Matt Tierney one late on in the game. But there was certainly something I noticed in the Kerry game that Dublin pumped the ball in all day and got a lot of joy, even when Conor Callahan threw Paul Murphy aside for his goal. But Niall Scully pumped a few in there, Brendan. Do you think it's coming back in more?
Oh, definitely. I think it's probably more coming back in from round about when teams turn over the ball, maybe about 20, 30 yards out. There's a kick pass looking to get you up the wings to open up the play, and you see players breaking straight away. Because teams in, there's so many bodies in a certain zone, there's massive spaces out there. So if you, back in the old days, it was hand pass here, hand pass there, slow build up, the other team retreated back in, and we've seen this horrible, ridiculous blanket defence. But the difference with county here versus club, this is still going on in club in a lot of places, particularly here in Donegal. It's shocking, it's horrible to watch. And it's so much harder for club teams to get out of that system because they just aren't spending the hours that the county teams are. People are sitting constantly watching videos, bringing in top coaches, looking, how can we get better? How can we open up the pitch better? If you're a team like Donegal, what's the point in your defence? Hand passing up the ball and a couple of your better players, your Langans, your Ryan McHughes, hand passing the ball over and back. When if you can release them into the wings, and then inside, you've got McBurdy, you've got Murphy, you've got whoever, get the ball into them and try and leave them one-on-one. Armagh did it brilliantly to Donegal a couple of times on Saturday evening before Donegal kind of sorted out their defence. So as much as that crossfield ball, we all love them, it's that ball first out of defence is the key. And we would have seen Currafin now do it for years. They were the prime example, and no one else could seem to copy them. Maybe they had the players. The first thought was kick pass. and then before a team could filter back, the ball is back in. So fantastic to see, and you're seeing the scores elevate because of that, because teams are getting in around people quicker. So yeah, I think that definitely the long ball's back. Whether the mark, funny you mentioned the mark once there. Nobody's talking about the mark at all, Shane. It's just kind of, if it happens by accident. I think we should just get rid of it. The quicker the better.
Yeah. A final point to you then, Declan. Should we get rid of the mark?
I've never liked it. Again, it's absolutely ridiculous. And it just goes back to something that was, I'll repeat myself again. It was the moment where the forward catches the ball, turns for goal, and it was, right, we've got a duel here on the goal. Like, we've got a cornerback. How's he going to use his feet and his hands to prevent this guy getting past him? And it was one of the joys of the game. And to see players sticking a hand up now is absolutely ridiculous. And it was one of those ones too. Never forget, like, it's the old saying, you know, a horse is a camel. A camel is a horse drawn by committee. Everybody has to do their own thing. And when you were asked to be, okay, Shane, Brennan, will you two head up the standing committee on playing rules for the GA? You say absolutely, but you don't want to be spending most of the guts of 2 years and have nothing but then and say, you know what, Gaelic football's okay here. People just generally don't do that. So they will load the questions and frame them, and then they'll ask for people to fill out surveys, and they'll come up with something just to say, yeah, that was us. We got that over the line at Congress. Like, yeah. But it is. Do you know what? I've yet to hear anyone actually defending it anymore now. I mean, it might have been at the start, people were playing it like wait and see. This could be good. We don't know yet. Now it's just no, nobody's for it. Not that I can see.
Been it, please. Well, look, lads, thanks very much. That's the football show done. Thanks very much to Brendan for joining me, joining us, and Declan as ever. Thanks very much.